My wife and I owned a bakery for 5 years. It was okay for me, but it was mostly her deal. She found her passion in baking, and I was her willing assistant. My passion, however, was in voice acting and impersonations. I was just starting to make some money on the side by utilizing my skill, so I usually didn't want to be at the bakery. My wife was growing annoyed with me because I didn't share her passion. I didn't think it would drive a wedge between us, but it did. One day, I was helping my wife at the bakery when a returning customer stopped by. I knew him AP for years, but when he came in this time, he looked disappointed that I was the one approaching the counter. He appeared to consider leaving the bakery altogether, which I thought was weird. I took his order for his daughter's birthday cake, and he kept glancing into the back. He asked how my wife was doing. After he left, I told my wife he was in and placed an order. She looked at me with interest, then looked away, bummed. Her hands were covered in dough while she told me she enjoys being the one to interact with customers because she has pride in our business. I just said something like, uh-huh, because I wanted to go home and record voices. Another day, when her cell phone buzzed on the counter out front, her hands were messy again, so I went to glance at it to see if it was important or business related. She looked worried as I walked by. When I looked at it, I realized why. It was a text from the aforementioned married father that ordered his daughter's birthday cake. As my wife prepared the cake, he texted her, asking if she was free to come over again that night at 7, since his wife and kids wouldn't be home. My jaw dropped as I stared at it. Another text came through that said he missed her body. I entered the passcode to my wife's phone for the first time in a year. Thankfully, she hadn't changed it. As I scrolled up, my eyes scanned over a plethora of naughty, sexting, nudes, and affair messages. My wife was getting antsy in the back room, asking me who it was from. I told her it was a spam email that tricked me for a second. She laughed a little and looked relieved as she put the little girl's cake in the oven. I told my wife I needed to go home because I had some voice acting things to work on. I knew she would believe me and leave me alone about it because fighting me on it never worked. I actually sat in my car nearby and stared at my wife's GPS location. I never relied on this before, and I could only hope she wouldn't turn it off. I held my breath when she started moving down the road. I started following her, and seconds later, a text came through from my wife that said she'll be closing the store late because a huge order was placed. My heart broke at this very moment. Then I saw her GPS turn a different way, and I knew we were over. She was sleeping with our married customer. I kept driving, just barely able to stay focused. I felt the blood moving through my body at an alarming speed. She hadn't turned off the locator, so she led me straight to AP's house, just as she was getting out of the car and his front door was opening. I met them both at his front door, and I can't even recall what I was saying, only that I was just yelling and staring at them. AP didn't know what to do besides yell sorry and try to shut the door as fast as possible, but I stopped him by punching him in the face. He fell to the floor just inside his house, unconscious. My wife was speechless and red in the face. I asked her to explain herself, but she couldn't speak due to shock and embarrassment. She freaked out that I punched him, but then all she could say was sorry. The affair fog cleared, and she realized we were standing in front of AP's house, all because she started an affair with him. A married man and father who shouldn't have been anything more than our customer. I started yelling again because I thought of our wedding day and the day we started our business. I dashed back to the car before the tears came from realizing the life we had was changed forever, and she probably did this more than once. I thought about all the messages they sent and how she lied to me. Sadness turned into anger, so I drove home, leaving her standing in AP's driveway. I packed stuff and printed notices to put on the bakery windows. As she arrived home, I was driving down the street to return to AP's house. The front door was closed now with another car in the driveway. All looked peaceful, but that wouldn't last. In their mailbox on their doors, in some of their bushes, and a few on the windows, I put copies of my notice. It named my wife and AP in a sexual scandal that deemed the bakery filthy. I quoted some of the filthy things they said to each other, and one nude of each. Then I informed the health department. Hours later, the whole town was freaking out. People started talking really fast about the scandal. You don't realize what a small world it is until it comes crashing down. My wife closed the business before the divorce was final and before the health department officially ordered her to close because her customer base was gone. She left the state alone with her SUV packed full, headed to someone she met online seeking a roommate. I got to keep our house since she couldn't afford it without the bakery, so I sold it, and just like that, everything we made together was dissolved. During all this, she did try reaching out to me, which is how I found out that AP was divorced, but they wouldn't continue to see each other. He had to move 120 miles in the opposite direction. She always said sorry and that she understood why I ended it. I asked her why this happened, and all she could say was that he greatly admired her cooking and flattered her by saying things like he wished she was his wife. I told her I wouldn't wish for her to be anyone's wife. I stopped answering her calls after that. I knew she was probably scared or going through a lot, and I didn't want my emotions getting involved in her karma. I am healing and doing well. With the profit I got from the house that I never wanted to see again, I got a really sweet new place to call my home. It includes a home office for my voice acting and impersonation career. Opie, I am so glad you recovered from this ordeal the way you did. It was so lucky that you found AP's messages. As hard as it was to go through this, you had to discover the truth, and you got them to follow through with their sneaky behavior to catch them in the act. They were very bold, inconsiderate, and careless. AP even knew who you were and ignored the fact that he was stealing your wife's honor and love. The least he deserved was a punch in the face and to lose the family he betrayed. I understand why you freaked out. Your wife and AP didn't deserve to get away with living a double life while they had loving spouses at home. You are an example of what to do and how to handle infidelity. Thank you for sharing this story. I wish you the best of luck. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I lived in California for the entirety of our relationship. We met when we were in college, both 19 years old. She was in theater and movie acting. She enjoyed acting in plays, but her dream was to be in the movies. She was lovely and already had some jobs as a model. I was smitten. I was majoring in behavioral psychology. We married after she graduated, and I continued my studies while she got roles in any play or movie she could find. She was always at rehearsal while I was at work, and occasionally when I was home. Sometimes I was invited to her rehearsals, but those invitations stopped when she got the lead female role in one romantic comedy play. She came home later and was gone way more during this play than all the other ones. By this time, we were married for 3 years. I asked if I could go to one of these rehearsals, and she said these were private. I thought that was weird. She got free tickets for her family to come when it was finally time for the performance. We all attended on the same night. Her mother, father, sister, and me. She was a beautiful, convincing actress. The male lead in the play seemed to have great chemistry with her, but nothing convinced me so much as the passionate kiss at the end. I'd seen her kiss in other plays, but this one seemed different. I was convinced my worries were valid when she looked at him instead of me after the show was over. Her own father made a comment that fed into my worry. He said she could rip out any man's heart because it looked like she was in love with that man. We got to meet the cast, but my wife introduced us oddly to her male co-star. She introduced her mom and dad as her mom and dad, but then she only introduced her sister and I by our first names. Like, we could have been friends of hers or a couple. I told her my worries later that night after our celebratory dinner. She admitted she felt bonded to him, and they had a great time together during all the preparation for the play. I asked her to stop talking to him completely after closing night. She looked devastated and said if I'd reconsider, she planned to work with him again. It was because of the onstage chemistry I was so uncomfortable with that she saw her career's potential to blossom with him as her co-star. I took this opportunity to ask her a few questions since she wanted me to reconsider. I asked if they ever hung out alone without my knowledge. She looked a little embarrassed, but said yes. I asked why, and she said it was to rehearse their lines and eat dinner. I asked if it was like a date, and she said she didn't see it that way, but she wasn't sure what he thought. I asked if he knew I was her husband, and she said she introduced me. I pointed out she only said my name, and she looked confused like she didn't remember doing that. Following the awkward silence, I told her I didn't want her to contact him or work with him again. She looked really upset and kind of angry. She said she didn't deserve to be controlled. I told her this wasn't something she could fight me on. It was a matter of keeping our marriage true and honest, without anything that would make one of us uncomfortable. Well, she did eventually tell me she'd stop talking to him, but 1 month and many long absences later, I knew she could still be meeting up with him and doing things without my knowledge. One day, 5 or so months later, my wife and I were actually spending time together outside when she took an Instagram selfie without me. It showed the back of our house and location, which is part of the reason why AP jumped our fence. The other reason is that my wife had apparently stopped talking to him for a few days, and now he knew why. It was because he saw me and realized she was married. Of course, I recognized him from the play. My wife was freaking out and trying to say she hadn't seen him since the play. He didn't want to say anything when he realized she was betraying him, but I told him if he didn't want me to call the cops for his trespassing, he needed to be honest and tell me if they were having an affair. He said they were, but he hadn't heard from her, and now that he knew she was married, he wouldn't see her again. After he left, my wife told me not to believe him. She said he'd been trying to see her again ever since the play, but she refused without telling him why, so he lost it. Well, I'd have to be a fool if I didn't at least investigate what AP said, so I checked my wife's phone and, to her dismay, found her WhatsApp and made her log in under threat of divorce. There were all the messages with AP. She only stopped talking to him for 3 days, but there was evidence she had sex with him at his house several times after they went out together on dates. They were a full-blown couple since the play. I showed her family via screenshots sent from her phone before I smashed it. Then I kicked her out, and she begged me to give her a second chance. She said she realized now that it was just an infatuation, and beyond their acting skills, they had nothing in common, and she didn't want to sleep with him or anyone else besides me ever again. I told her she might as well join the Coven of Nuns because she would never have me again. I trusted her, supported her, and wanted to build a great life with her. After I kicked her out, she tried countless times to break in, so I got restraining order until our divorce was final. Then the house was officially mine. Opie, I am sorry your wife fell for a man that was never meant to be hers. I'm sorry she lied to you about it and kept her marriage to you a secret from him. She doesn't deserve to be given a second chance after something like this. She would never respect you in the same way, knowing she could get away with cheating whenever she felt like it, and always count on you to keep a roof over her head. I am proud of you for all the actions you took, and that you didn't give in to her begging. It takes a strong person to be able to handle this the way you did. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My wife was a literate woman, so she really enjoyed writing letters to a couple of pen pals. It was always her thing, and I never questioned her about it. She'd tell me a few things about what her friends were up to, but it was never anything that weird. She was always the one to get the mail to. It came while I was at work, and she never failed to bring it in. I never saw the mail she received. I just assumed she would tell me if anything exciting was happening. My wife got a gym membership. I couldn't believe it, but within 5 months she lost 50 pounds. That is an extreme weight loss, and she earned it. I was really enjoying her new confidence in the bedroom, but our bedroom activities gradually became less frequent. I was pretty bummed that it always seemed like she was focused on something deep in thought about daily problems or at the gym. I eventually persuaded her, but it seemed like something was on her mind. I asked her what was up, and she said one of her pen pals was moving to town soon, and she was nervous to meet her in person. I told her she shouldn't worry about it or feel like she has to go. I offered to go with her, and she insisted that wasn't necessary because she was too nervous to change the dynamic of their relationship and was going to keep their relationship to strictly pen pals. As soon as she said this, I suddenly had a flashback of what she told me before we got married about an ex-boyfriend she had that was serving time in prison. They were together for several years, and his release date wasn't until that very same year. I swear I nearly had a heart attack. I grabbed my chest and went into the bathroom. My wife was asking me what was wrong, what was going through my head, and I asked her shakily if she was talking about her ex being released from prison. She hesitated to answer, but said yes, like a deflating balloon. She looked super nervous and sweaty. I asked her what else she was hiding from me. She pretended to be innocent and clueless, but I told her I knew her for 8 years, and she wasn't going to get any lies past me. She said that he already got out, and she already saw him several times. Even worse, she could be pregnant and wasn't sure who the father was. I steadied myself from falling over and yelled breathlessly for her to get out. I couldn't even look at her. I couldn't believe she was despicable enough to do this disgusting thing she just admitted to. She pleaded with me not to leave her because she wasn't sure who the father was, and if it was my baby, we should keep our family together. I told her she was nuts for thinking that sleeping with her ex-felon boyfriend was forgivable. We had no idea who the father was, and that was horrible. I eventually got her outside, along with some clothes and crap she owned. She was sitting out there for a while, but when I checked the fifth time, she was gone. I didn't know what she was going to do, but I honestly hoped she wouldn't go to the felon. Over the next 3 months, she tried calling me, leaving me emotional voicemails, and texting to ask for money. She was staying with the felon. She wouldn't admit it was his baby until I told her I wouldn't give her money either way. Then she told me it was his. She said he drank a lot, and she felt like it was only a matter of time until he went back to prison. Well, before he got in trouble with the law again, he got in trouble with her. He slept with several other women and didn't try to be discreet about it at all. He didn't respect her at all, and it was painfully clear he didn't consider her to be anything close to a wife. She started calling me sorrowfully every week. She said she had no idea her life was going to end up like this. She admitted that she blamed herself and her stupid mistake. I told her that admitting she made a mistake, or several, was the first step to making smarter decisions. She asked me what was going to happen to her, and I wish I could have prepared her for what was to come. She was dumped and kicked out by her felon lover, for months pregnant. Shortly after that, he was taken back to prison while hosting a party with illegal things. She told me on a voicemail that she was taken into a women's shelter, but it was first come, first serve each night, so sometimes she failed to get there early enough and had to sleep on a park bench. If she couldn't find a new place to live, she was at risk of having her baby taken by Child Protective Services. I was nervous for her, but didn't involve myself too much with it. I knew she was no longer my responsibility, and things have a way of sorting themselves out somehow. I wish she would have been honest and appreciated the new life she created with me. Instead, it's like she wanted to have a relationship with both of us. She made several poor decisions by going behind my back and lying so many times she lost the great life we had together. Wow, Opie, I am so sorry your wife betrayed you and kept in contact with her ex without telling you. Not only that, but she had so many chances to come clean or stop communicating with him. She should have gone to the gym to improve her health and spice up her marriage with you. It's a shame she didn't realize how good she had it before giving it all up. I'm not sure what he was sent to prison for, but usually it's a good idea to consider that fact before jumping into a serious relationship. Thankfully, there are a lot of ways to keep tabs on where a significant other is. It's a shame it's even necessary. A person who's ready to commit to a long-term relationship should have to prove it by dating for a long time while remaining independent. I know life throws all kinds of different situations out there, but that's why it's wise to be slow to move in with someone or get married. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I wish you all the best going forward. Now, let's get into our second story for today. My wife and her friends took 6 months to plan a vacation to the Netherlands without me. I worked a lot, but I encouraged her to go with her friends. None of them had significant others, and this was her thing from the beginning. I wasn't going to tell her no because it was her decision, even though I was her partner. I never thought she put herself in a situation to cheat on me, but I was wrong. She just happened to be communicating with a man from the Netherlands for longer than it took to plan the trip. When I was expecting her home, she called me and told me that as hard as it was for her to do it, she was leaving me. Well, technically, she had already left me. She was going to stay in the Netherlands. I was shocked. Before I could ask many questions, she told me she met someone there and instantly fell in love. She no longer cared for the life she built with me. I couldn't believe what she was saying. She was my wife, and we just talked about conceiving a child, but she took advantage of my money to leave me for someone else. After pressuring her for answers and accusing her of leaving her husband for a stranger, she admitted that she'd been talking with him for almost a year before planning the trip. Our divorce was pretty straightforward. She left me and suddenly moved to a different country, so I got to keep the house and didn't owe her alimony. She called me a month later, sobbing and remorseful. She said AP kicked her out. She had nowhere to go and no way to get a loan. She begged me to help her get back to the country and assured me I'd never hear from her again unless it was to pay me back for the cost of the ticket. I pretended to think about it so she could go on about how stupid she was. It was music to my ears. Then I told her no, I would never help her or speak to her again because she was a horrible person. She wailed in misery as I hung up and blocked her number. Her family called me, confused, 1 week later. They told me they finally got a call from her, and she said some crazy stuff they wanted to confirm with me. After confirming that we did divorce, they asked me if she was actually stranded there. I told them I wasn't sure because she was none of my concern anymore since she left the country to be with AP. They were stunned and silent and could only ask me if I was sure. I said yes, and they apologized to me, saying they couldn't believe their own daughter was capable of this despicable behavior. They also explained that she told them she was stranded with nowhere to live because I left her there while we were on vacation, which led her into the arms of the man she was staying with, who recently kicked her out. I told them that wasn't true, but it was fine if they didn't believe me because our divorce was final. They were more willing to believe me than her. They said she asked them for a plane ticket home because she didn't have a dime to her name and no connections or approvals for a loan. I was just as disappointed in her as they were, for her poor decisions and complete disrespect for her family. She didn't even care to update them about her life or ask for advice before getting into this situation. They told me they were going to help her, but it would be the last time they ever spoke to her because they were so betrayed and hurt. They planned to disown her like she was so willing to do to them and me. I was glad to hear it, but tried to sound indifferent. It wasn't until another year passed that I actually heard from my ex-wife. She was back in the country, but completely alone. It was February when she left me a voicemail saying she needed me back. She was crying and didn't know where she was going. Call me what you will, I never called her back. We might as well be strangers in life now. I've been healing and building my own fortune. I guess my life would best be compared to Principal Lewis from American Dad. I have hope for the future instead of bitterness for women. I know my experience was crazy, but if I take the time I need to find a good woman worth keeping, it's unlikely to happen again. I mostly live gratefully, without expecting anything while accepting good things with humility. Opie, I am so sorry your wife abandoned you to move in with AP. I know she conspired to leave you for him if they hit it off on the vacation. You can't just leave the life you knew while keeping it secret from everyone and then expect family to be there when you need them. Life decisions bring consequences, so make sure your decisions are as considerate of others as possible. She didn't think anything through and was a fool to think this could turn out well. Chances are it's never a good idea to give up your family for something that might not work out. Having a secret romantic interest while in a marriage is nothing but trouble, and a respectable spouse would never put themselves in that situation. If you're comfortable in your marital home, appreciate who you have and avoid stabbing them in the back. I wish you nothing but the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. I recently discovered that my wife is having an emotional affair and there might be a physical aspect to it too. The guy involved has been a long-term friend who's been around since before I came into the picture. We've been married for 20 years, no children together, but she has grown-up kids from a previous marriage. Our intimate life took a hit about 5 years ago when she lost interest, making it clear that it was a chore. We grew apart. A couple of months ago, I realized I couldn't continue like that, so I started working on our relationship and our improved significantly. However, she dropped a bombshell saying she's no longer romantically or solely in love with me. At the same time, I discovered she was messaging and spending time with this friend. I confronted her and she admitted to going out for drinks with him, seeming to think it wasn't wrong. She told me he got kicked out by his wife and asked her to move in with him. She's uncertain about what to do and needs time to think. I took some time to process this, and we've had multiple conversations. I love her and believe we can have a happy future, but I can't continue living like this. She needs to decide, but it seems like she's torn between her head and her heart. She knows I'm a loving husband and we have a good life together, but she's finding excitement in the affair. She talks about long-term plans like gardening, but I can't help but wonder if she'll be here to see them through. She understands the stress this uncertainty is causing me and that she needs to decide soon, but she's reluctant. I've made it clear that I won't accept this double life, and if she can't choose, I'll do it for her because our life together should mean more to her. Right now, it's a strange half-life where she kisses me goodnight but spends her days, presumably with him. Thanks for reading. It felt good to get my thoughts out. I'm going to make a decision soon, I have to. My own mental health has been suffering for a long time, and this situation has only made it worse. On a positive note, it forced me to confront my own issues and realize that I couldn't handle them alone. I've reached out for help. I had an epiphany yesterday when I hit rock bottom, and my first thought was still about how this would affect her, but at this point in my life, my top priority is me, not us and not her. The last 2 years have been challenging, and I admit I've been neglectful. Instead of addressing that with me and suggesting we find our closeness again, SHE chose to have an affair. If our marriage ends as a result, that's on her. I hadn't heard of terms like 180 and pygmy dance until I found this website a couple of days ago. I never thought I'd need to. I never would have believed she was capable of this, hence the title of this thread. The issue for her is that she knows I'm steady and reliable, and she values the security of that. She also loves our home, cats, garden, basically the whole package. But her affair partner is offering her fun and excitement even though she knows he's unreliable and the house he's in is not great. I have a question about the 180. I understand that it's about showing you're moving forward, focusing on self-improvement and becoming a better person. However, during this time, doesn't it seem like you're indirectly accepting the affair by allowing it to continue? This seems to conflict with most of the advice on this thread, which suggests confronting the wayward spouse and putting her in a position where she needs to make a decision promptly. I apologize if this sounds confused, but I am indeed feeling that way right now. On the positive side, I've seen a doctor and started taking antidepressants. I also have a therapy assessment booked for tomorrow to help me cope with my depression, which has been a hidden problem in my life for the past couple of years. I'm also getting my hair colored this week, something I used to enjoy but stopped because my spouse didn't like it. Doing it now feels rebellious, but I want to, so I'm going for it, regardless of what anyone, including my WW, thinks. It should raise a few eyebrows when I return to work next week. I'm incredibly grateful for this website, especially the tactical primer and the 180. It's astonishing how accurate and helpful that information has been for me in the short time since D-Day. If any newcomers are reading this and haven't checked out those articles yet, I strongly urge you to do so, even if you're not ready to start the 180 method. This morning, my wayward spouse initiated a conversation about our marriage, which is a first because I've been the one starting all previous discussions. She also admitted that she's unsure and flip-flopping about her decision. I shared my pain and hurt caused by her actions, and for the first time, she got upset because of the pain she's caused me. We had an honest discussion about the future of our marriage, and although no decision has been made, it was clear that my words were making an impact. She also mentioned noticing a change in my attitude since D-Day, which is contributing to her thinking. So, we don't know if this will lead to reconciliation or divorce, but for now, we're still communicating, and there's still hope. I have to admit that some parts of the 180 are quite liberating and feel really good. I've booked myself a theater trip next weekend to see a show I really want to see. In the past, I would have asked my wayward spouse, and if she didn't want to go, I probably wouldn't have gone either. But this time, I didn't ask. This experience has made it clear that one of the changes I'll be making if we reconcile is that I won't hold back from doing something just because she doesn't want to. I'll decide to do something, and if she wants to join, that's fine. If not, I won't miss out just because I used to put her feelings first. This would be a significant shift in our marriage dynamics, and if she doesn't like it, well, tough. She'll need to remember that her actions caused the upheaval in our marriage and changed who I am and how I approach life. If she had any suspicions that our relationship dynamics were changing before, it's now crystal clear to her. She was quite shocked and confused when she found out I was going to the theater without consulting her first. Then this morning, she complained that she never knows when I'll be home during the working day. I usually work from 8 to 4, but as I have a mix of office and work from home days, I just tell her I'll be home around lunchtime. She found this unpredictability unsettling and didn't like my new, less predictable schedule, even though she's complained before about me being too predictable. Hi there, thanks for your best wishes. Over the weekend, I went to the theater, and while the show was a bit cheesy and not fantastic, it felt amazing to get out and have some fun. I've always loved live theater and shows, and interestingly, I used to work at that exact theater for a few years, which was quite a thrill. One small change to the plans was that my wayward spouse wanted to go with me, so I agreed, and surprisingly, we had a very good time together. She's been more attentive and affectionate lately and seems to be making an effort to bring us closer. We appear to have entered a new phase where she has either ended the affair or she has escalated her lying to a significant extent. Naturally, I want to believe the former, but remain cautious about the latter. For now, I'm waiting to see how this unfolds, but in a strange way, I feel relieved that we've reached a tipping point. Either she's genuinely trying to work things out for reconciliation, or I'll discover she's been lying extensively, which, in my mind, would be a line I won't accept, and I'd be ready to proceed with divorce. She's definitely making sure I know where she is at all times, and her actions seem to support this. However, I don't fully trust her, and it'll take a long time to rebuild that trust. She's also initiating more physical contact, hugs, kisses, and touches more than before. Personally, I'm feeling much calmer, which I attribute to a combination of medication, having more time to process my thoughts since D-Day, and the improved atmosphere between my WS and me. Additionally, I've been working on my health. I developed an overeating disorder over the past 2 years and gained a significant amount of weight. Over the last 4 months, I've been controlling my diet and lost some weight, which feels great. I've even had to buy new clothes. However, one major hurdle remains. She doesn't seem to believe she's done something profoundly wrong and doesn't want to talk about it. It's as if she's denying it happened in her own head and discussing it would make it too real. She also doesn't grasp the hurt. I understand we're different, and she wouldn't feel the same way, but I need her to comprehend how deeply I've been affected. I've printed an article from this website about the tears of the betrayed spouse and plan to read it with her at the right moment because that article precisely describes how I've felt. It's still early days here, so I don't know where this will ultimately lead or even exactly where I want it to go at the moment. But I'll keep moving forward and see how things unfold. I can't believe she might try to love bomb me, but as the title of this video suggests, I have to admit that all of you have been right on target so far. I'll mentally prepare myself in case she attempts that. This morning, I focused on practical matters like sorting out my council tax and other financial stuff. Since I don't have a forwarding address for her, they had to call her to get the information. So she already knows that I'm taking steps to organize my finances. In the afternoon, I spent time with a friend, just talking. She's been through a divorce, so she understands what I'm going through. Tomorrow, I have another friend coming over to help me rearrange furniture, change the use of some rooms, and essentially help me claim the space, as he put it. My wayward spouse is coming over on Saturday morning to take away the chickens we kept in the back garden, and I don't want to be responsible for them. So I'm already preparing myself for that encounter. I'm completely exhausted tonight as I've had a very busy yet productive day. This morning, I received a message from my wayward spouse saying she wanted to collect the double bed on Saturday when she comes to collect the chickens. I've already disassembled the bed and placed it by the door, ready for her. I know this might seem overly generous, but there's a purpose behind it. I've completely reclaimed the house. I moved my belongings into the larger bedroom, rearranged the furniture, even replaced the canvas wall hanging she liked with a framed football shirt. I also bought new bedding. There's nothing left in the room to indicate she ever lived here. She had also left a lot of her stuff lying around the house and in the bathrooms. I decided that these things were an MY way, so I boxed them up and added them to the pile of chicken-related items she's collecting. I mostly work from home, and for the past 3 years, my office has been in a garden building we have. Today, I moved my office back into my old bedroom in the house and turned the garden building back into a gym, its original purpose. Basically, I've changed every room in the house in some way, even if it was just rearranging the furniture to give the rooms a different feel. I needed to do this for myself to make the house feel different. I suspect she's going to be in for a shock when she realizes how much I've changed everything in less than 48 hours since she left. She probably won't be expecting that, but hopefully, it shows her that I accept her decision and am moving on with my life. Today, WS showed up with her son and a friend to collect the chickens and the bed. I remained cool, calm, and collected throughout, had my game face on. Then, after she left, I got a bit emotional and had a brief cry, but she will never see me like that again. Surprisingly, it was her who seemed emotional and found the experience difficult. She walked through the house and I hung back, overhearing her exclaim, "Bloody hell," when she realized everything had changed. She seemed to notice every detail, even the new bedding and the football shirt that replaced her canvas on the bedroom wall. I think a heavy dose of reality hit her at that moment. I handed her unopened mail, and she tried several times to engage in conversation, but I refused to talk about anything other than the stuff she was collecting. I made it clear I wouldn't discuss anything else until she comes to get the rest of her clothes, etc. Just before she left, she tried to kiss me. I backed off, put my hand up, and made it clear it was not happening. We had a quick peck on the cheek and a brief hug to say goodbye right before she moved out, and as far as I'm concerned, that was it. There's no reason for her to touch me or try to kiss me again. I'm done with that. Her choices and her actions have caused this situation, not mine, and she needs to understand that reality. I have 3 fantastic friends who have really stepped up to support me. They're giving me some tough love at the moment, but I appreciate it. I was under strict orders to WhatsApp 2 of them when she had gone, and the third, who doesn't do social media, is coming over later today to see how things went this morning. My support network has been in full swing today. 2 friends came over, and the third was on the phone with me for over an hour. I'm incredibly grateful for their support. I was talking to my friend who's been through a divorce and has known both me and my wayward spouse for many years. I was telling her about how WS behaved this morning when she came to collect her things. She got emotional and seemed overwhelmed, and she couldn't wait to leave. My friend believes that WS expected to arrive this morning and find that nothing had changed in the house and that I would be an emotional wreck in the corner. Instead, WS encountered a calm and confident Detroit spouse who had completely rearranged the house and physically distanced himself from her attempts at affection. My friend thinks WS has suddenly realized that she's lost control of the situation and me, and that I've taken back power and control over my own life. It does make sense. Despite the pain WS is causing me, I did feel some sympathy for her this morning because the whole experience seemed to upset her so much. I guess that says more about me as a person than it does about her. I can understand that it must have been shocking for her to see the house she's lived in for many years suddenly changed, but she's made her decision and now needs to live with the consequences. Our friend also believes that it won't be long before WS realizes she's made a huge mistake and wants to talk about moving back in. Unfortunately, she went through a similar experience with her own WS a few years ago. I need to mentally prepare myself for that possibility because right now I'm not ready to deal with that emotion. A couple of months ago, I was mentally prepared for her to leave, realize her mistake, and I might have considered taking her back, but I'm no longer where I was 2 months ago, and I can't even contemplate moving toward reconciliation anymore. I told her at the beginning of this process that there would come a point when I'd had enough and the pain would be too great to continue. Her comments this week, actually moving out and admitting that she knew a month ago but didn't tell me because of my mental health problems, have pushed me past that point. I can't understand how she could have known all that time and still be affectionate to me each day, making me believe she wanted reconciliation. How could she kiss me, hold me, and talk to me the way she did, all the while knowing she had decided to leave? I truly feel like I've been living with a stranger. I need advice. I've been communicating with my wayward spouse via WhatsApp to arrange when she'll come to collect more of her belongings, and we've also started the divorce process. I've received the divorce form and will fill it out this week, then I just need her to countersign it. The divorce process in the UK is more straightforward when you submit a joint application, partly because we don't have at-fault divorces anymore. However, Some of her communications have been a bit strange, and it seems like the speed of the process is upsetting and overwhelming her. I'm naturally an organized and practical person who, once decisions are made, gets things done as soon as possible. I'm now applying the same principles to the divorce, hence wanting her things gone and wanting to get the divorce process and financial settlement underway, even though it still takes at least 7 months, even if both parties agree. I understand that she's lost control of the situation, but I don't understand why that should matter anymore. She's getting what she wanted, which is to live with her affair partner, so why should it be a problem that I'm being practical and giving her what she needs, namely a divorce? Is she getting upset because I'm coping so well and not falling apart emotionally? But again, why should that matter? She left to live with AP, and if there are still any caring feelings left for me, shouldn't she be happy that I'm coping and handling things calmly and practically? I realize she might be concerned about the divorce process becoming contentious. Her first divorce was apparently very acrimonious, and her ex-husband still can't be civil to her, even after all these years. They rarely communicate, but occasionally they have to because of their children. However, I'm not him. I've assured her several times over the last 2 months that, although this is not what I wanted, if we end up getting divorced, I want it to be calm and amicable. There's no need for it to be argumentative. The decision has been made, and the best outcome for both of us is to work through the process and then go our separate ways. She told me last week that she's only told 2 friends about our situation. I visited one of them today to return a spare key to our house, and it's clear that even though she's a friend to WS, she thinks WS has lost her way and doesn't approve of her actions at all. I'm totally confused. OMG, this morning was incredibly tough. WS came to the property with a van to collect more of her belongings, and today felt much more difficult than Saturday when she first came back. I think maybe I was too numb on Saturday to feel much, but now, after a week of this situation, it hit me harder. On Saturday, she only took things that were clearly her own possessions and the chickens, which I didn't want. This morning, we had to deal with joint possessions like kitchen appliances, saucepans, and other things that, in my mind, are part of our marriage and that we both bought and used together. That felt much harder than her taking her own things. Looking back, I should have realized it would be different, but I didn't. However, I managed to hold it together until she left, and then I got upset. She also wanted to chit-chat about her week, but I just couldn't engage. I only discussed the things she was taking, remaining polite but uninterested. She was quite unprepared and didn't bring nearly enough boxes or space on the van for all the things she said she wanted to take today. So, many items will need to be collected on at least one more visit. It seemed like she got overwhelmed and just wanted to leave, which she did. We've agreed that I'll let her know which morning or afternoon I'm available next week for her to collect more belongings. I also told her that on that day, I want us to complete the divorce form so it can be sent off. It was an extremely tough morning, but I spent an hour on the phone with a friend afterward, and another friend is coming over this evening to see how it went and give me someone to talk to. Of course, I also have all of you good people here, and I'm very thankful I found this website because it has helped me a lot. Hearing your thoughts, knowing that others have survived similar situations, and receiving your advice has helped me prepare for what WS might do next. You've always been right, and I'm truly grateful to all of you. Despite the pain, I'm really enjoying this time to myself. I'm staying busy, and I love the changes I've made. Making decisions that only consider myself is a new and liberating experience, and it feels good. On a positive note, I had a job interview yesterday for a promotion I've been working towards for a long time, and I got the job. I'll start my new role on July 1st. I've arranged for WS to come around next Thursday to collect more belongings, but it seems she's not in a rush to take everything. She mainly wants to retrieve her pottery and some glassware. I don't feel that these repeated visits are helping me, so I've left the delicate items for her to pack, and today I spent 7 hours packing everything else. Her books, CDs, DVDs, various other possessions, betting that her family used when they stayed with us, and plenty of spare towels, sheets, and betting that I'd rather see gone. I've even cleared out the whole loft space and made sure all her things are ready for collection. Everything is neatly boxed or bagged, making it easy for her to collect. Once this stuff is gone, there will be nothing left in the house for her to retrieve. I know she wants some items from the garden, but I'll probably arrange to be elsewhere when she comes for those. While sorting out the spare bedding, I couldn't help but smile at the thought of her family visiting her new property. She's always complained about not seeing her grandchildren enough, but they used to visit quite regularly. We live in a seaside town, and it's just a 10-minute walk to the beach, which the kids love. I'm not sure how often they'll want to visit the new house, which is clearly not as appealing, being far inland and miles away from the beach. Also, while packing her books, I stumbled upon her diaries from the last 3 years. I took a moment to read about 2022 over a coffee, and unsurprisingly, they were spending time together much earlier than she had led me to believe. WS made me think the affair started around the end of November, but according to her diary, the AP video called her while he was on holiday in Crete, presumably with his wife, in May of the previous year. They even went out for drinks together in June. So this has been going on for a whole year before she decided to leave. It makes me wonder if she would have ever told me about it if I hadn't found out and put her in a position where she had to make a decision. I had made it clear that I would only consider moving towards reconciliation if she went no contact with the AP, something she couldn't bring herself to do. I had a great night's sleep last night in my brand new double bed. As I mentioned in an earlier post, WS took the double bed with her when she moved out. So now, she and AP are sleeping in an old bed that I used to share with my WS. Meanwhile, I have a new super comfy double bed all to myself, and no one but me will use it unless I decide they're worth my time and allow them into my personal space. The changes in the house are still happening at a furious pace. In addition to new bedding, I've bought new towels and various other items, just things to make the house feel different to me. I've also discovered the therapeutic benefits of gardening. Previously, WS did all the gardening as it was her passion. But yesterday, I spent part of my lunch hour cutting back and tidying some of the plants. It was surprisingly satisfying because the garden looked tidier and more orderly when I had finished. I'm not sure how WS will react when she sees it, but it's no longer up to her. When she lived here, I let her tend the garden how she wanted. Now that I live here, I'll tend the garden how I want. I'm also a bit of a watch collector and have bought myself a new watch to congratulate myself on my promotion. It has been dispatched, and I should receive it tomorrow, which is very exciting. I know it's very early days, but at the moment, I do feel more relaxed in the house. I'm not constantly wondering what she's going to be grumpy or complain about next. I'm starting to think that despite my efforts to preserve the marriage, this could work out as the better option for me after all. If she stays with AP, then I have the chance to write myself a new chapter. If she wants to discuss reconciliation, I'll have much healthier boundaries and requirements before I would. My wife and I had been together for about 5 years when everything fell apart. We met at a farmer's market and felt a strong connection with each other. I asked her out for drinks, and we had a wonderful time. We ended up dating for about a year and a half before we got married. I never thought I would get married before I met her. She flipped a switch in my brain, and I realized how great something like that could be. We had discussions about starting a family after we were married, and we were both in agreement that we wanted children. After about 2 years of being married, we decided we wanted to start trying. Of course, at the beginning, we were just doing it the normal way without seeking any medical intervention or anything like that. My wife was monitoring her ovulation and making sure we were sleeping together at the prime times. However, nothing was really taking. After a while, we decided it would be best to speak to a fertility doctor. They worked with both of us to help us find the cause of our problems. I gave them a sperm sample, and it turned out that I had some fertility issues. Long story short, I went for a physical and was diagnosed with celiac disease, which has a major effect on sperm motility. There was a chance that after I switched to a gluten-free diet for celiac that I could bounce back from it. It wasn't the complete end of the story for me fathering my own children. However, my wife seemed impatient. I understood why she would be. She was in her 30s and she wanted to have 3 children, so she needed to start soon. The longer it was put off, the more risk there would be in each pregnancy. We talked about our options. There was IVF with a sperm donor, adoption, and freezing her eggs. They were all very expensive. Some time went by and I had been on my new diet for a few months, feeling great, and my wife wanted to start trying again. I don't quite think she understood how everything would work for me. I didn't think it was going to be such a quick fix after changing my diet like she did. But lo and behold, after a few months of trying, she got pregnant. It was very exciting for both of us. She found out she was pregnant later than she would have liked, but all that mattered was we were finally going to have a kid. During the pregnancy, my wife was acting off. With how excited she was to get pregnant, I thought she would enjoy it. I knew that she was likely to have a lot of mood changes and things of that sort, but it almost felt like she couldn't stand being around me. Honestly, I thought she looked down on me because of the issues I had with getting her pregnant. I hated feeling that way, but that could have also just been some of my own insecurities. I noticed that she was getting a lot of phone calls that she was being very secretive about. I would be in my office and hear her whispering with someone on the phone. She would be texting with her phone obviously facing away from me, and she would step away from me sometimes when she would take calls. It started rubbing me the wrong way, but I didn't say anything about it. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch next to her when she left her phone behind before going to the bathroom. Ever since she had been pregnant, she took a lot longer in the bathroom than she normally did. So I knew I would have a couple of minutes to look through it. My curiosity had really gotten the better of me. When I looked through her phone, I found a conversation between her and another man about her pregnancy. I didn't know who it was right away, so I scored through the messages looking for any indication of who they were. What I gathered was that he was a man who she met online and had sex with. At the very top of their message exchanges, they had a clear conversation about how she was going to meet up with him exclusively for unprotected sex so she could get pregnant. He agreed to it and, in that conversation, mentioned how they wouldn't contact each other after. Even after that first meeting, they continued to meet with each other. They were continuing a sexual relationship through their messages as well as in person when they had the opportunity to. What bothered me the most about all of that was how she told him that she was pregnant a day before she told me. Of course, it wasn't my child, but I thought it was up until that point. In the recent messages, he kept mentioning how he wanted to be in his kid's life. My heart was completely in my stomach when I was reading all of that. My wife told him that wasn't an option. He knew what their deal was when they got together. She wanted to get pregnant, so she hooked up with a complete stranger to do so. The guy was practically begging her to consider being with him. I sent myself as many screenshots of their conversation as I could, and I put the phone back down before my wife got back. I pretended like I had just been called into work so I could leave and avoid being around her. I had a lot of things I needed to figure out, and I didn't want to be around her to do it. I went to my sister's house and I told her about everything, showing her the messages that I had. She was as shocked as I was about it all. She was the one who pretty much convinced me that I had to leave her. I met up with her the following day, and she introduced me to a friend of hers who is a divorce attorney. We started putting everything in motion so I could serve her with the papers. I didn't know anything about the guy she cheated on me with, so I tried to do some digging to find out who he was. He knew that she was married when they hooked up, and I just thought that was disgusting. I found out that he was the owner of a small home renovation company. He mostly serviced local houses, but it seemed like his business was really picking up. After everything was settled with the attorney, I went to my wife and I brought her the papers. She was shocked to see what I was doing. I told her that I didn't want to be with a cheater, and she understood that I found out what happened. She tried to make it seem like it was my fault that she cheated. She tried to make it seem like it was my fault that I had a disease that affected my ability to conceive a child. She made it seem like I forced her hand into cheating. I didn't want to hear any of it, so I just ignored her lame excuses and told her that I would see her in court. As for the man she slept with, I decided that I was going to ruin his business. I left reviews on all of the social media pages planning what happened. Everybody always looks at the one-star reviews when they're looking at them. I knew that I would get their attention. He countered by getting some of them removed, but I kept putting them up. I hoped that it would lose him a fair amount of business if husbands saw my review about how he knowingly slept with a married woman and got her pregnant. They likely wouldn't want to work with him. My wife and I got divorced, and I found out through the grapevine that she and the other man ended up trying to be together. However, they did not work out. She had to move out of the house that we lived in together because she couldn't afford it on her own. And she had to have joint custody of her kid with a virtual stranger to her. I feel bad for the child. No kid should be born into the world with two parents who don't love each other. I know they're probably going to have a lot of issues growing up. And in some ways, I wish I never found out about this so I could have been there for them. But I'm glad that I got out before I was involved in their life anyway. Opie, the fact that your wife tried to blame you for her cheating because of your health issues is horrible. She was just trying to come up with an excuse to make herself look like the victim in all of it when she wasn't. Cheating is awful as it is. But cheating on your husband to get pregnant by a stranger is ridiculous. Just from a genetic standpoint alone, you know almost nothing about that person. You wouldn't know what health issues their family has, mental health issues, nothing. That's something that you should consider before having a child, regardless of who it's with. That's why most people, when they choose to bring a child into the world, do it with somebody that they know and trust. I think it's ironic that they didn't work out when they tried to be together. They clearly didn't know much about each other when they hooked up the first time, and now they're tied together for the rest of their lives. I do really hope that they can at least be cordial with each other for the child's sake. It is a real shame that they're going to have to grow up seeing that as an example of a relationship. Now for our next story. My girlfriend and I had been dating for about 9 months when the lockdown first started during the pandemic. She and I had been working in the same office building, and I would see her from time to time. I always thought she was attractive, but it didn't go anywhere for a while because I was in a relationship. When I broke things off with my ex, I decided to talk to my girlfriend. We hit it off right away, and we started dating each other. Things got pretty serious with us pretty quickly. We had actually been planning on moving in together when the lease was up for her apartment. She had moved to our city for work and found a room available through some Facebook housing group. She moved in with two people that she didn't know very well, but after some time became friends. They were an engaged couple, let's call them Jack and Jane. They were renting out a spare bedroom in their house for extra income. I met them a few times and they were really nice. They seemed to be really in love and they were fun to hang around with. My girlfriend would invite me over from time to time and we would have game nights, cookouts, and things like that. I was also living with roommates at the time, so real privacy was difficult for my girlfriend and me to come by. We were both looking forward to our leases expiring, so we could look for an apartment together. When the pandemic first happened, things were very difficult with our relationship. My girlfriend was asthmatic and I worked in healthcare at the time, so being together in person wasn't safe. She was very high risk, and I dealt with a lot of exposure on a daily basis. Our relationship was mostly virtual for the first 6 months of the pandemic. I actually ended up taking vacation time to quarantine so I could see her on her birthday. When her lease renewal came up, we discussed a few ways we could be extra safe about exposure so we could live together. We figured it out and found a nice apartment together. Even though she was trying to minimize her exposure to the outside world, she would still visit her old house from time to time to hang out with Jack and Jane. During the 6 months, where she was completely isolated with them, they had grown very close, even more than they were before the pandemic. She was visiting them more often, and it felt like our relationship was reverting back to how it was before she moved in with me. I wanted to spend time with her and show her that I loved her, so I was frustrated with her absence at home. I asked her about it one day when she came home from Jack and Jane's late. She told me that she missed living with them and that was why she was there. I was upset hearing that because I thought she would be happier about living with me. She assured me that she wasn't unhappy living with me. It was just that she had grown very close with her friends and missed them now that they were apart. They had all gotten used to being with each other on a daily basis, and it was an adjustment for her. At the same time that was happening, we stopped being intimate with each other. As I mentioned above, we spent a lot of time apart at the beginning of the pandemic. I thought that when we got back together, things would be exciting for us. I was wrong. My girlfriend tried to make it seem like she didn't want to get too close to me because she was nervous about getting COVID. I understood that, but she wouldn't have been any more at risk of getting it through kissing me than she was sleeping next to me. I tried to explain it, but I didn't want to make it seem like I was trying to pressure her into anything. I could feel her growing distant, and I was starting to get nervous that maybe she and I were drifting apart. I saw a future with her, and it was heartbreaking to even think that, but I would have been naive not to. One night, Jack and Jane invited us over to have a game night like we did before the pandemic. This was after the vaccines were out and everybody was feeling much safer, so we were all excited to get together again. Jane and I both had to work until the early evening, so we set a meeting time around 7. I ended up getting to leave my shift a little bit earlier than I originally planned. I went right home to my apartment to shower and change like I always did when I got off work. When I got there, my girlfriend wasn't home. After I got out of the shower, I texted her and asked her where she was. I waited for about 15 minutes and she didn't respond. It was about 5:45 when I got home, so I figured she might have gone to Jack and Jane's house early. I decided just to head over to see if she was there. When I pulled up, her car was in the driveway, so I knew that I was right. I walked to the door and I froze when I looked through the front window. It was open to let the breeze in, and I could see my girlfriend straddling the other guy and kissing him on the couch. They were getting very handsy with each other, clearly about to have sex. I knew that they weren't expecting me to be there so soon, so they must have been taking advantage of the time they had alone. I was frozen in place. Everything that had been happening recently made a lot of sense to me. She was spending all that time at her old house. She was growing distant from me, and she didn't want to sleep with me. I figured whatever was happening between them must have been happening for a while. I took a couple of pictures before getting back in my car and leaving. I drove home and tried to figure out what I wanted to do about what I just saw. I wasn't going to be with my girlfriend anymore. She could move back in with the others if she wanted, for all I cared. When I got home, I sat down in front of my computer and an idea hit me. I knew the 4-digit password to get onto my girlfriend's laptop, and I imagined her Facebook was probably still logged in. I went to it and looked through her messages with Jack. From what I could gather, their relationship started while she was still living with them. At the beginning of the pandemic, she was having trouble paying her rent when she was laid off from her job. She told me that she needed to talk to the couple about that because she was nervous she would lose the roof over her head. I remembered her telling me that they had agreed to let her stay and pay back rent in installments. From their messages, I could see that he reached out to her and told her that they could work something out between themselves. From there, they had a conversation about sleeping together and keeping everything discreet between them. He had a nest egg savings account that he would use to cover her portion of the rent so Jane didn't notice. He wouldn't lose money because her rent went into a joint account he and Jane shared. His partner never knew about what he was doing. I took a few screenshots of the messages and sent them to myself. While I was looking through her Facebook, I got a phone call from her. I lost track of the time completely and hadn't shown back up to their house for game night. I had no intention of going back anyway. She called me and asked me where I was, and I told her that I was about to call her because I had a horrible migraine and needed to stay home and unwind. She offered to come home and help me, but I told her I just needed to be alone in the dark. So she said she would stay and play some games with them, then come home later. The following morning, I reviewed my lease agreement and realized that I might have a way out of living in the apartment. I contacted the landlord and I managed to get my name off the lease so I can move out officially. I was going to be leaving it all in my girlfriend's name. After I was finished with that, I reached out to Jane and asked her if we could meet up because I had something important to tell her about her partner. She was really suspicious, but I asked her not to say anything to him because it could cause a lot of problems. She met me at a park and I told her everything I knew. I showed her the pictures that I'd taken as well as some of the screenshots from my girlfriend's Facebook Messenger. She was heartbroken about everything. I comforted her for a while and eventually we came up with a plan on how to confront them about it. There was a trend on social media at the time to have PowerPoint nights. It was a gathering where everybody would throw together a PowerPoint presentation about something weird they knew too much about. So we made a group chat with both of our partners and a few other mutual friends that we had. Everyone was really excited about the idea of it and said they'd be able to make it the following weekend. Over the week, my girlfriend was very excited about the presentation she was going to give. She put a lot of effort into her own. Admittedly, I didn't put half as much effort into my own because all it was going to be screenshots of her messages. The night finally came and everybody was gathered around the television in the living room. They were all expecting funny jokes and weird facts, but the title of my presentation was Quid Pro Quo Sexual Harassment with a picture of my girlfriend straddling Jack. The surprised look on everybody's face when they saw it was priceless. Without paying much attention to their reactions, I continued the presentation. I explained what it was and I used the examples as some of the early messages sent between my girlfriend and Jack, where they discussed having sex in exchange for rent. I was about halfway through the presentation when my girlfriend finally came to her senses and turned off the television. She started screaming at me about how I embarrassed her in front of everybody there. Jack and Jane were having an argument as well. My girlfriend was angry with me for going through her Facebook messages. Everybody else was just sitting there watching, sipping on their drinks with wide eyes. I told my girlfriend that I was moving out of the apartment and that the rent was going to be her sole responsibility. Then I forwarded her the new lease agreement that the landlord had sent to me. She started crying and saying that she couldn't afford it on her own. That wasn't my problem anymore. As it turned out, the girlfriend of the couple owned the house outright. She had inherited it from an uncle who passed away, and her partner was living in it without being on any kind of agreement. She kicked him out of the house. We both left our partners, and it was for the best in the end. My girlfriend and Jack ended up moving into my old apartment together. They stayed that way for about 6 months, and when the lease was up, they both left. From some of our mutual friends, I learned that they had tried dating, but it didn't work out. While they were dating, he was constantly messaging Jane and begging her to take him back. He kept telling her about how much he loved her, and my ex-girlfriend wasn't too crazy about that. OP, it sounds like your relationship had a lot of problems. I could tell from how you were talking about the relationship during the pandemic that you really cared for her. You even sacrificed spending time with her for her own health. It's a real shame that she did what she did. It sounds like she missed out on a great partner. It's very sleazy of Jack to have messaged her about the arrangement for rent, especially when he didn't even have his name on the house. He took advantage of being in a position of power over her, and that's creepy. However, the fact that they continued their affair after she moved out makes me think that she was already interested in him. I'm glad that you were able to speak to his partner as well. Neither of you deserved to put up with the affair that was taking place, and I'm glad you both got out. I think the PowerPoint presentation was a great idea. I can imagine everybody in the room was shocked when they realized what was happening. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.